Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ClueCon Weekly. I'm your host, Jon Gray, and today we're going to be talking about the difference between deploying code and releasing software, technical tasks versus business problems you're trying to achieve. To help us unpack this, joined by someone who has spent years connecting all these dots between engineers, product, customer delivery, Michael Dowden, CEO of Andromeda Galactic Solutions. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad. Well, Michael, for folks meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're pioneering over at Andromeda?
Yeah, sure. My background is as a software developer, but I've been writing code for almost 30 years now. And I've done literally everything from building physical hardware to uh, designing user interfaces and everything in between. So at different points in time, um, that has been combined with a lot of experience in startups and in consulting. So I've worked with over 100 different companies over the course of my career through my consulting
Wow.
work. And that has given me kind of this broad perspective of everything in the life cycle of getting software out the door, but also the way different companies work and operate. So what we're doing at Andromeda is focusing really hard on product development, product management. So we work with customers who have software that they would like to launch as a paid product. And we also have a number of our own products from our Ignition content management system to Link, our gaming platform, and FlexiPark, our parking management software. So do a lot of different things.
Very cool. How did you come up with that name, Andromeda Galactic? That's a pretty cool
Uh,
name. How did that come about really quick?
So it's from a couple ways. Andromeda is a constellation, but it is also a galaxy. So we we
Nice.
have a bunch of space nerds in the company, and so we decided that that's the name we were going to go with. It got us a lot of different opportunities for directions we can go with it. But
Uh-huh. I like
the
that. I
the
like
the,
that.
the, the, the name is like all about it's Galactic Solutions. Like do space tech? No, but it's all about thinking big, right? It's expanding your horizons and planning for the future. So
Mm-hmm. And kind of in the galactic theme, something with our audiences, we're pretty diverse. So kind of say aligning the stars can sometimes be pretty difficult. And you in products kind of sit in the middle of that.
yeah,
A PR in terms of release could be a pull request, some products or marketing releases, product revenue or profit revenue. It can mean a lot of different things. So
right.
when you begin to talk about kind of the objectives and what you're trying to achieve with some of these products and releases, what is it that you're really trying to achieve, and how do you kind of align all of those teams together?
Um, Really, what you're trying to do is design software that works for people, but you're trying to go beyond just the UI design and just the software design and into the process design around every piece of it. What is it like to, as a customer, to experience the software for the first time? What is that
Mm-hmm.
onboarding experience like? If you're a regular customer, what does that look like? Um, do I have different types of users? Do I have like these casual users and then these constant power users? Does their experience need to look like? What kinds of customizations do I need to include to make those things happen? And it goes into um, when should I push out updates in a way that does not inconvenience my users or doesn't get in their
Mm-hmm.
way or prevent them from doing their work? Um, it's all about being forgotten, right? Like one of our products, FlexiPark, which is our parking solution. It's one of the mantras that we have in how we approach designing things is how do we get out of the way? Because nobody, and I mean nobody, has a goal of parking their car. Their goal is to go out to dinner, it is to go to the
Yeah,
movies, it is to go to meet
exactly.
with a friend, right? That's their goal. Their goal is not to park. That's an inconvenience. How do we make that as simple and seamless and painless as possible and then get out of the way? And you've got to look at all of your products in that type of way. It's not just what is our goal for the customer? What is the customer's goal in using our software? What are they trying to accomplish? And it may not have anything to do with what we're that niche that we're filling.
No, it is really difficult to kind of put yourself in the customer's shoes. And I kind of romanticize that a little bit of kind of when you put a product out there, you're really putting yourself out there and you need to have that reliability and trust. And I think that's something that you touched on a little bit where no one's goal is to really park the car. It's to do the thing. Like you need to have trust in your systems that, hey, I'm gonna use this because it's just gonna be one less headache or something for me to kind of have to deal with. So
Yep.
and you mentioned a good point about updates as well. I'm curious on the feedback loop and how that can kind of be effective of how you are able to translate the customer's needs to those engineering teams. And I'll give you a really quick example. Like I absolutely hate the McDonald's app. I love McDonald's, but I hate the McDonald's app. And every time I go to order and I'm thinking like, man, I need to submit like a feature request because it shouldn't take 20 buttons or clicks in order for me to have to order a Big Mac. So I'm telling the person at the drive-through maybe, or that's where they're hearing it from a lot of people who aren't technically minded. How are you able to kind of close the gap between the customer's frustrations or points that maybe they want to improve, and then getting that all the way to the engineering teams that aren't in the McDonald's drive-through?
Wow, there's so much to unpack in what you just said. So one of the things to understand is that when you're designing and building a product, you have to look at the product alignment to the company's goals and values. So my goals and my values are to do the best thing for the customer, right?
Hmm.
But you may find that some companies have a goal of driving the most revenue. And if your goal is to drive the revenue and not to make the customer happy, and you might think that those are at odds with each other, but for some large convenience-based organizations like McDonald's, they might be able to get away with that. So that's where you start to see some dark UX patterns where it may just be that they haven't given the thought to the application, but it
Mm,
may actually be that you're encountering a dark UX pattern where they're intentionally adding friction into the process so that you'll do something that is easier, faster, more convenient, that costs
yeah,
more, or that they'll give you more opportunities for upselling or whatever else, right? So sometimes you're providing this feedback and it's falling on it's getting ignored. It's because it's working as intended, right?
yeah,
You're providing positive feedback into that system that says, "Yep, this is working
exactly.
the way we intended." Because what they're doing is they're looking at how many people are frustrated enough to express frustration versus are going along with upcharges and other things. There's this
Yep.
balancing act, and I don't personally like to design things that way, but that's something that's very common. The next thing that's really important is to make sure that you have all of your channels open, right? You want to make sure that it is as easy as possible for the person interacting with the customer to pass along feedback and as easy as possible for the customer to provide that feedback. So I like to
Hmm.
include feedback mechanisms right inside my apps. But I also like to make sure that there are open communication channels with the employees or the people that are doing things. Um, that needs to go into some consistent process where it gets reviewed. Because one of the really important pieces here that's hard um, is first of all, aggregating the reports into things that are the same. Okay. This is tricky and very challenging because different people will report the same problem in radically different ways using radically different language. And uh, that can be really hard to understand. Okay, these three things that sound totally different, it's actually kind of reflecting the same problem. So we want to count that as three reports on this problem, and we want to
Hmm.
aggregate it in that way. And it's important to do that because one of the biggest mistakes that I see product teams make is making product decisions and changes in direction on insufficient, which means effectively statistically insignificant feedback, right? So let's say that you are a company that has 1 million customers, but one customer calls all the time, and your
Hmm.
support person is tired of it. They're over it. They're calling to complain. You've got to fix this. You got to fix this. You got to fix this. And you're like, that's fine. I want to make their life easier. I want to make this customer happy. I'm going to implement the change that's going to make them happy. And the next thing you know, you're getting thousands of calls a day because it turns out the only person that was upset with the way things were was that one person. And now nobody likes it because the reason they weren't complaining is because they were happy the way it was. And so you've got to look at the silent feedback of nothing and consider that carefully against how many of our users are actually complaining. But in order to understand when it's meaningful, you need to know how many users are using this feature in the first place, right? If one guy is using the feature and they're complaining, that's 100% of the usage of that feature. That starts to become interesting, but then you still need to understand, um, why are other people not using it? Is it because they can't use it? Is it because they don't know about it? Is it because it's not working for them? And you've got to be very cautious. One of the other big mistakes that I see people make in interpreting product feedback is making flawed assumptions based on the data. We're not going to prioritize our mobile application. We're going to prioritize desktop because nobody uses our application on mobile. We have tons of analytics and data that proves that nobody uses it on mobile. It turns out that the reason nobody uses it on mobile in almost every case that I've ever seen is because the mobile experience sucks. It doesn't work. You can't, it's not user friendly, or in some cases, it's so feature sparse that you literally can't do the activities that you want to do by using the mobile app. So nobody uses it.
Yep.
But that provides this incorrect feedback cycle that says, hey, nobody uses it on mobile, so we need to stop prioritizing mobile. The reality is, in most cases, what's actually happening is people aren't using it on mobile because it's frustrating, and the first opportunity they have to jump ship to a competitor that has a good mobile experience, they're going to do so. But you're feeling like you're making good decisions because you're, quote, data driven.
Yeah, exactly. No, there are a lot of good kind of trade-offs. It seems like you are
Yeah.
bringing up, and especially in sitting in product, you have to do that a lot. So I'm going to throw a couple different examples at you, some micro, some macro, and I'm curious just on your take as to what the if you find that teams are kind of struggling with this more often, if they're not. Which one you think that like maybe AI has kind of tilted the scale a little bit? So you talked the first one about like money versus customer frustration with the McDonald's application. Maybe people are kind of tainting some stuff.
Yep.
Giving quality support and how that leads to like one man's bug is another man's feature request. You see a lot of those kind of trade-offs. But also kind of in terms of product launching, shipping versus speed, like how quickly we're able to develop some of these,
Right.
while also how reliable are they. And then
Yes.
that kind of leads to another point that I alluded of just innovation versus reliability. So how are some
Right.
of these trade-offs like, do you find that some companies are experiencing more time or tilted scales in one over the other, and how has AI played a role into that over the recent time?
Well, yeah, there's another really big. There's a lot of stuff going on in that question. So
Yeah.
let me start by talking a little bit about how I like to approach that deploy, that getting software out to the customer. So one of
Hmm.
the goals of tech teams a lot of times is to do these real-time deployments, right? Hey, we got an update, we go through automatic testing, let's push it into an environment, whether that's tests, some companies do prod, they do this on a rolling basis. So as soon as code is done and it's made it through all of your automated checkpoints, and in some cases there's also some manual checkpoints that go in, it gets pushed out automatically. And
Yeah.
we're good with this. We like doing this. The problem is that that's actually bad for customers in almost all cases. Even if it's for bug fixes, when we push updates too rapidly, it can mean, hey, every time I try to use your software, I've got to run an update, or I've got to, things are a little bit different or whatever, or I'm in it all day during the course of the day, and it reloads on me automatically 5 or 6 times because that's how fast you're deploying software, right? And then I lose my place and whatever else. So we've got to really carefully think about that kind of aspect. So I strongly recommend separating the concepts of a deploy and a release. And a deploy is moving code into an environment, where a release is making that code available to the user. And there's a lot of different techniques that we can use. I get into this in one of my conference presentations, but you can use feature flags, you can use blue-green deployments, you can use like canary releases, where you release to small groups and kind of expand that over time. And honestly, depending upon the nature of the change you're making, you probably want to use slightly different strategies. When we're just rolling out minor updates and bug fixes, we can tend to do this fairly rapidly, but we still need to consider, hey, maybe we should do that uh, at 4 a.m. when nobody's using the software.
Yep.
Or, maybe people are using the software all the time. Maybe I want to do that as a rolling release, so different customers are going to get it at their 4 a.m., right? As opposed to just a universal, like one-time kind of release. When you're dealing with companies that, if you're dealing with retail, you don't want to push a bunch of software updates on and around Black Friday. That's dumb, because that's when they're making all their revenue. You don't want to risk anything right then. You're dealing with a bunch of accounts. You don't want to do things around tax season, right? You want to push your
Yep.
updates outside of that window. When you're dealing with accountants, in some cases, you have to push updates really early in tax season because the laws just changed a bunch. And so you're going to but you need to be predictable. They need to be able to know what to expect, when it's going to happen. And so we want to use technology techniques and technology tools and processes to make it possible to, as much as possible, push the code out as much as we want. That's great. By all means, push code into environments frequently so that we can test it, we can review it, we can make sure that it's good, so that we are using these really reliable and rapid repeatable processes for the deployment of code. Definitely. But from the user perspective, we've got to consider the UX of when and how do we actually force this change on the customers, especially if it's a large kind of UI type of change that's going to change their workflow and change how things work. We want to get customer feedback in some cases before we force an update on them, so that we can make sure that it's going to work for them. And these are the types of things we want to build into that process. And you alluded to a little bit, how do we make sure that these processes work? And part of it is that it's an iterative process over time. We want to make sure that we have our own feedback loops, in terms of not just from the customers, making sure that we're getting feedback from them on, hey, this was really annoying because it's interrupting my workflow, all the way down to our QA people and our engineers being able to provide feedback on what's easy and what's bad. The product owner at the end of the day needs to have a lot of control over what the end experience is. And one of the systems that I like is, when you're developing a feature, that the responsibility for that feature is with the developers. Before that, it probably belongs with the business analysts, because they're the ones kind of defining the feature. Now, the responsibility for that feature moves over to developers. You wanted to push that into an environment. Now the responsibility goes to your DevOps engineers and your ops pros, as they get that out into an environment. When you're ready to release that to your customers, that process, that responsibility now shifts over to your product owners and your product team. Once it's out in the world, maybe that's with the product team, or maybe now the responsibility shifts over to your support team, right? And you're shifting that responsibility for that feature, and you need to have clear and concise handoffs, and you need to have a feedback process between each one of those handoffs and each step of that process as you're working through things. And so that becomes a really important part of what we try to help people build. When it comes to the influence that AI has in this process, the answer for me is not much, because it's really easy. The thing about the use of AI tools in product lifecycle is that it is a really easy to get started with stopgap that makes it look like you're making progress rapidly and prevents you from getting all the way there.
Mm.
Because there's a number of reasons why. One of the reasons why is that if you have built a process that is kind of running through an agent or a generative engine every time through the process, as opposed to like a more traditional style of machine learning where you are training with very specific data for a very specific goal, right? These are two different things. Traditional machine learning, you're training on a data set, you are iterating ever closer to a solution. And when you build that out, when you're running through a model, you have a very, very good consistency, you have very, very good reliability. I am a firm believer in that. I've been using it for years. For example, in my parking product, we use a traditional machine learning AI to read photographs and parse out all the vehicle information, the make, the model, the color, the license plate, what state it's from, all that detail, all those details come back to us. It's amazing how that streamlines life cycles and how you can provide good user feedback on that. But when you're talking about using something that is effectively just a large language model under the covers, the only thing a large language model is good at is language. And so when we apply it to other types of purposes, it gives us the impression of positive feedback very, very quickly. But what happens if let's say you've built an agent on Gemini, and then the Gemini engine version changes, the behavior changes. Now you have a process that you are relying on that may not exhibit the exact same behavior that it did before. How do we manage to that? How do we control that? Um, and when I am in the use case of focusing on user experience, I want to be very cautious that I am providing a human touch to that human experience and that I am not providing an artificial response to that and how I'm handling things. Is there value in using an agent to read customer feedback and try to categorize and aggregate that into a narrow set of issues? Absolutely. I think that sounds like a great use case because that is a very hard problem to solve. And it is something that leaves the humans in control of the final outcome of where we go from there. What I don't want to do is push the AI agents out into having a direct impact to my customers in a way that I don't have a human buffer between them, because now I've just literally taken the control over my user experience and given that to an unreliable automation. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
personally like that very well. And I don't find that I find that there's some places like using it for information categorization and aggregation. It's very good at that. It's pretty reliable about it. And that is something that is very time consuming and cumbersome for a human to do. Please, let's automate those things in that way. But there's a lot of things that I see people using AI automation for that, quite frankly, a stupid shell script is cheaper, better, and more reliable.
Mm-hmm.
Just do that, right? Let's use the right tools for the problems that we have and make sure that the tools that we're using aren't impacting our customers or our bottom line or even our engineers in ways that are not fantastic.
Yeah, no, I like that take in the consequences of AI in some of these battles, especially as a lot of our guests who have sat where you're sitting. You know, we talk a lot about the positives and how much innovation has come about it. We're saying,
Oh,
hey,
totally.
we can go 1,000 miles a minute, and I just wrote like 2,000 lines of code. I'm done for the day. You know, hands off. But then from the product side of things, you're like, hey, slow your roll a little bit. That
Right.
thing that you pushed, no one can understand. It's absolute gibberish. You can't even understand what you wrote. Let's pump the brakes on this a little bit. And as you were saying with the
Right.
shell script, it's kind of funny, you know, how many times I am trying to cut down time by using a AI tool, and I'm spending 3 times more just trying to do it. Reminds me of cheating on my homework back in like high school, basically, because I know the exact same feeling. Um, but
I
one
like to refer to prompt engineering as it's just code. It's just a different type of
yeah,
code. You're
exactly.
providing structured language to a computer to make it do something. You're programming.
It's only as smart as you are, and I find that all the
Yeah.
time. It's a nice humbler sometimes. I get very humble with them. But one part that you were mentioning that seemed to be a theme when you were going across the different kind of balancing acts that different teams have to make is the importance of responsibility. And I know here at Signalwire we're releasing constantly. We're AI native, so we're kind of evolving at that
Totally.
kind of speed. Also across different teams. So we have not only different types of teams within the company, but we're also located all around the globe.
Yep.
We are always having releases, and something that I saw on LinkedIn that I thought was absolutely hilarious of yours was you made a comment that every executive issuing back to office orders is really just outing themselves as an incompetent manager. And I think that that was so funny, and I want to hear your 2 cents on that. Specifically, how leadership ties into making these processes
Sure.
work well, and kind of the influence and how it kind of trickles from the top down in order to have a successful rollout for the customers.
Sure. Totally. So I've been running a remote first team for a decade now, and despite being a small team, we operate across a huge percentage of the time zones. We have between our customers and our own direct reports and our custom like we have customers. Our customers have service providers, so we are often all the way from the West Coast over to India and every single time zone in between. Pretty normal, and you've got to manage to that. So here's why I say that back to office is lazy or incompetent. And it's because, first of all, overwhelmingly, the people I talk to that have had to go back to office, they're doing all their meetings on Zoom anyway, right? They're not going back to in-person meetings. The reality is that most businesses and most companies are either global or highly distributed. So it doesn't matter where I am, I still have to deal with time zones. I still have to deal with that communication barrier. I have all these same challenges. And the thing that, or one of the primary things that I feel that managers like about being in person is that they can walk up to you, see that you're working, and interrupt you at any point in time to ask you to do something, or they feel like there's this more organic and natural camaraderie that builds up because you're in physical proximity. And one of those things is micromanagement. And the other one of those things is true to a point, but it also means that you are, when you're in this office environment, people can interrupt you at any point in time. You're building this natural camaraderie, but you're also, it's naturally exclusionary of other people that are not nearby, and you tend to build cliques. You tend um, to build these groups, and it is often also the source of some of the toxicity that can happen in a company culture. And you're effectively relying on human nature and the way we tend to behave in groups and in proximity as a surrogate for intentionally building culture and managing teams, right? You're basically saying, I can't be bothered to be intentional about building culture. I can't be bothered to be intentional about getting feedback from people. I can't be bothered to respect my employees' time and to respect their boundaries. I am going to force myself on the issue. I am going to monitor everything they're doing. But I'm also not going to take responsibility for the way relationships develop and the way communication happens. And so it's the ultimate kind of cop out as a manager to say, this is too hard to do online. It's hard. The answer is, and this is, I gave a lot of talks about remote work early in the pandemic when people were kind of forced to deal with it for the first time. And the answer is that working remotely makes it obvious how hard it is to do things well. But if you find that you can't do it, remote, but it's not a problem when you're in person. It's because you're not doing your job as a manager ever, and that your employees find it easier to circumvent you when they're together in person, and you're not really
Mm.
realizing that, right? And now I have to acknowledge that there are some people that desperately want to be physically in proximity to people as part of their job, right?
Yeah.
We're not meant to be isolated creatures. We're social creatures. And some people deal with this work from home. Some people perceive this interaction you and I are having right now as a social interaction. Other people would perceive this as isolation because we're not sitting together in the same room.
Mm.
Right? And that has a lot of bearing on how you psychologically manage being separate. So there's a lot to be said for meeting people where they're at and giving people options, but it's kind of a problem to take the option of remote work and working from home away from somebody kind of arbitrarily without having a really good justification. And the justification is almost always micromanagement. It's almost always control, or in some cases it's economic. We have invested, we have a 20-year lease on this building. We
Oh
have
boy.
to use it, right? That happens.
Yeah.
That's a thing. Those are
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the quiet justifications. But the reality is that business is more distributed today than it was a decade ago. We are, I am constantly in meetings and on calls with people from other parts of the world. And that's just a normal part of life now for most businesses, even small businesses like mine. And it's really important that we don't give up. We for years, everybody was online, everybody was remote, and seeing that going away is really a sign that businesses are struggling because they're not understanding how to work with their employees, they're not understanding how to work with their customers. Um, it's 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 not it's not meeting the needs of the people that you're interacting with, and you just can't get away from being remote. Even when we're offices, we're being remote. So you've got to kind of go through that process and figure out how I'm going to do this. What are the steps that I need to do to get people to work together effectively? How do I manage to outcomes instead of managing to time spent in a chair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the important things. And you know what? Are some of your employees gonna work fewer hours because they're working from home? Yeah, maybe. But here's the thing, if you're managing to outcomes, you're going to find that that really doesn't matter. And are some people going to work a lot more? Yeah, we know that statistically, most people work more hours for your company when they're at home, either because they feel like it, like
Mm-hmm.
I was going to spend that time driving anyway, I might as well do it. I personally find that people have a lot more buy-in and a lot more investment when they're involved in it. One of the things, though, that's kind of this dark side is that people are so concerned about the appearance of being lazy or ineffective that they're working extra hard to appear like they're doing good work. And that's, I mean, the businesses are making out from that, but on the same side, that's not great leadership either because it means that you're not clearly communicating what the expectations are, and there isn't a clear boundary and division of work. So one of the reasons that you see more in-person roles in places like Europe is because of the strict labor laws, because there's a strict division of work time and personal time. And that can be really, really, really hard to segregate when you allow people to work from home. Um, that is at least not a nefarious purpose for expecting people to be in an office, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those things that as we hopefully mature as a global society around what work means and what it looks like, how do we get better at that? At both managing that work-life separation and balance, but also allowing people the freedom and flexibility to do their job well and to fully understand what does effective communication look like with my coworkers? What does effective communication look like with my manager? What is expected of me in terms of my output and my productivity? And getting more clarity around that, getting more mature around what that looks like. How do you run businesses like that? Improving our leadership skills in ways that we're effectively answering questions today that didn't exist 50 years ago. This wasn't an option,
Hmm.
right? It didn't exist even 20 years ago. This was a stretch. I mean, I've been in my career for about 25 years um, professionally, and I have worked remote at least one day a week for most of that. So this isn't not new, but the concept that we can be fully 100% effective from literally anywhere in the world is a fairly new concept. It's about a decade old, and these are new challenges. And some people just can't handle that challenge, and or don't have the time and psychological safety themselves as a manager or a leader to develop the skills necessary to manage in this way, or they're not
Hmm.
supported in doing so, or they're not even encouraged to do that.
No, you brought up a lot of really good points right there, and I one of my favorites is how we're redefining what work means, and that really spoke to me at the beginning of COVID. I started working at SignalWire right at about that time, and I kind of
Nice.
chose this company specifically for that reason because of the video conferencing kind of platform that we're on, but also kind of like the larger idea of call fabric and how we are able to be just as effective communicators, whether it's a personal call or whether it's a work call, whether it's a video call. We're doing things like this, we're really able to feel as though we are in office to a certain extent, and by being
Yeah,
able to like work on the same platform that we're also building, it's kind of some positive nice feedback that we
absolutely.
get into, and it's a really nice culture that is kind of built around that. In the world of company management, and how you were mentioning that some employees have to work a little extra harder, or the extra mile, in order to make it look as though we are doing what we're doing, and kind of like the hyperactivity theme that goes around. How do we look on the opposite side of that, where how do you make the little guy kind of look good to his boss when we are in environments like this, without having to stay up all night and rack out all these things, or especially over documentation? We see that all the time in remote workplaces, where people are having to do the thing, they then have to explain the thing, they then have to document the thing, they then have to go explain the document that they wrote about the thing. So what advice do you kind of have for someone who is trying to look good in a business, as well
Right.
as especially in remote work specifically?
I would say that if you're a tech lead, team leader, manager, one of the things that you should be doing is to help highlight the contributions the people of your team are having, right? And it doesn't need to be a big thing, but make sure to call it out. Recognize it publicly because it makes them feel good, but it also makes them look good. It helps your bosses understand what's going on, and it also helps the rest of the team understand that you see what people are doing and what people are working on, and know that they're not just kind of invisible. Because when you feel invisible is when a lot of times you feel the most compelled to go over and above. A lot of times people are going to work until they get recognized for what they're doing, and they're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And that leads to burnout. I mean, just every
Oh,
time. And
definitely,
so,
definitely.
right? So, just simple acknowledgement of, hey, thanks for your contribution to this feature or this product, or great interact with that customer, or uh, little things like, I don't need to worry about this issue because I know that Sam's going to have it. He's got that covered, right? And just those little acknowledgments of, I'm not worrying about that because I know that they've got it, can speak volumes about kind of the trust that you have in your team and the expectations that have been given. I think that stand-ups can be a great tool for helping communicate, make sure that you're clearly communicating um, kind of where the areas of responsibility are. I don't like using stand-ups for tasks as much. I mean, we tend to do that a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
s- if you find that your stand-ups are people giving this diatribe of everything they're working on, that's people trying to justify their existence and sound important. Watch that. Ask people to talk about what is your focus? What is your goal? What is the most important thing you're working on today? Whether if you do daily or weekly stand-ups, what is the most important thing you're doing this week? Um,
Mm-hmm.
what are your barriers? What can other people be helping you with, right? What are the big important highlights that you're kind of what's got you stressed, what's got you excited, what do you need help with? I mean, those are the types of questions we should be answering, not what are you actively working on. And one of the things that happens too is it encourages us to work on lots of small tasks or break problems down to small in some cases because we're trying to sound like we're doing all these different things. um, I encourage people to really focus on one big primary goal a week. And there may be like my goal is to build this feature as a software developer. Great. I might do 100 different tasks related to that thing over the course of the week, and that's fine. But my goal is to get to this milestone in the development of this feature, and that should be my goal. That's the stated goal. That's what people are helping me achieve. And that is a much better way of kind of breaking down this communication and planning, because now I'm not out here trying to measure my productivity in terms of how many tasks I'm accomplishing. It's did I get to this goal or not? If I got to the goal, fantastic. Congratulations. Kudos. Well done. You did a good thing. Hey, you made it past it. Awesome. That's great. But if you didn't, okay, what is the issue? Did you not get the support that you needed? Was it harder than you expected, and why? How do we mitigate that moving forward, right? And don't make it about, well, did you work hard enough? Did you put in enough hours? Are you lazy? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
that's I see so many managers asking questions in ways that are interpreted as those questions. And the real thing is, how do I help you do a better job estimating? How do I help you get the support you need? How do I remove barriers or obstacles from your path? And when we put it into how can I help you be successful types of terms, it completely changes the vibe. It completely changes the safety of having these conversations and how I'm able to progress and improve. And it makes us better over time, because when the goal and the actions are all about improving the process and making me more successful, I'm invested in that. If you're also invested in that, we're going to go places and we are going to continue improving.
I really like that. You were talking about being goal orientated as a manager and earlier in the podcast, and now kind of
Yeah,
goal orientated as an employee. And then even in those meetings, the goals of your goals. So I like that a lot. Just being able to separate yourself from the actual work and figure
right.
out what's going on, because I find that there's a lot of frustration in terms of that with workplaces and just being able to document what exactly it is that's going on. Um,
Well, because one of the challenges with task-based management also is that if you're doing task-based management and you've given me a number of tasks and I'm stuck, you give me 3 tasks and I'm stuck on all of them for some reason, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to work on. I don't know how
yeah.
to help myself. And now I'm worried, right? Because I know that I'm sitting here being unproductive. I have 3 tasks hanging over my head, and I have no context or framework in which to improve my situation.
Hmm.
But if you're giving goals, if you're giving values based, so as the leader of a company, I try to be very values based. Here are the values of the organization. Here are the goals that we're trying to achieve. And my expectation is that every single person should feel free to do anything they want towards the accomplishment of those goals and in alignment with those values. And when we present things in that way, when we hold people accountable in that way, it completely changes the dynamic, because I'm never stuck because the task is stuck. I'm only stuck if I get into a situation where I don't know how I can apply my skill set to that goal, or I'm in a situation where I don't know how to make a decision because it feels like all the available decisions are out of alignment with these values. Those are the
Hmm.
things you get stuck on. But there's other goals you can work towards. There's other things you can work towards. And so it's a completely different nature of getting stuck that leads to really great, good discussions and conversations about how to either build decision-making frameworks or how to do a better job communicating values, maybe come up with some new goals to work us around this. There's a lot of ways we can solve those problems, but you've empowered people to continue moving forward within that framework.
No, the values approach is very refreshing. You know how you can think of it as values as a person, but then when you think of
Yeah,
it as
totally.
values as a business, and then even when they're not aligned, you're not the best version of yourself, and leading to not being the best version of your business. At the
Yeah,
end of the day. Well, Michael,
totally.
this has been very refreshing. I've enjoyed this so much. Is there anything
Awesome.
I've yet to ask you, or I forgot to bring up? Anything you want to plug?
Oh goodness, there's so much going on, but I'm always happy when people reach out. If you hear something that you agree with, or heck, if you hear something you don't agree with, reach out to me. I'm on Blue Sky primarily. I'm also on Mastodon. I'm Mr. Dowden absolutely everywhere. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to have conversations about what remote management, remote work look like, what releasing software looks like, and if you by any stretch of the imagination happen to be in Berlin in the middle of October, I'm going to be out there for Serverless Architecture Conference. It'll be in person. So hit me up if you happen to
Awesome.
be there.
I will do my best to make it over there. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Everyone, check out Andromeda Galactic Solutions, and we'll see you next time, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks so much.